subscribed to a web-based product made by a company called, or sold by a company called Discernis. They actually track food contact and food legislation using it, and they have an unofficial translation of the Dutch regulation there. Next, the Italians, the Decreti Ministerii. The original one dates from 1973 and covered plastics, including coatings, rubber, regenerated cellulose films, including a list of adhesives, which is one of the few lists of adhesives you'll find, since repealed for regenerated cellulose film, but still actually applicable to plastics by cross-reference, bizarrely, paper and board, glass and stainless steel. And in 1984, this was extended, adding tin cans. In 1988, tin-free steel, 2007 aluminium. So it looks pretty straightforward. It's only in Italian, which by itself isn't too bad. But the problem with it is that the many amendments to these 4 basic DMs are not consolidated anywhere apart from in an unofficial translation which Discernis have. So if you don't subscribe to Discernis, this becomes a really complicated and difficult legislation to use. Although, you know, it does have its uses. The Spanish have their decree 847 of 2011, covering all sorts of useful things: adhesives, elastomers, rubbers, ion exchange resins, etc., including plastic, polymer production aids and aids to polymerization, some purity requirements for colorants. That's quite similar to the Council of Europe resolution on colorants, and also having a mutual recognition clause saying we will recognize food contact articles and materials cleared under other legislation as long as it meets the requirements of your mutual recognition that exist within the European Union. Talk a bit more about mutual recognition later. It's available in Spanish naturally. Here we are, that web link there in red. And there is also an unofficial machine translation into English existing at this rather more complex web link. Or of course you can Google translate the Spanish one yourself. Finally, France. Here we have an overarching regulation. It's Decree 2007, Decree number 766, which was essentially the French writing the framework regulation from 2004 into their own legislation. So that's fine. The problem with French legislation is really quite similar to that with Italians. There are numerous individual laws. They date all the way from 1905 with a law restricting the use of arsenic in paper and board. Sounds like an excellent idea. Right up to date, and they're not really drawn together in a particularly usable form. There is a book you can buy which has them all in, but once again they're in chronological order, not arranged by material or substance type. So pretty tricky to use. I find that the best guide up to 2004 is this information notice referred to here from 2004 on materials in contact with foodstuffs, which you can Google, and it is available in English as well as French. And that contains all the laws by material type and the compliance testing required by material type. So that's great up to 2004. For anything since 2004, Discernis is probably your best source. However, one thing French law is particularly useful for is its coverage of colour additives, where it's the most comprehensive. Colour additives being colorants and pigments, often referred to as the French positive list of colorants. Now, interestingly, this has been repealed by France. However, the French government, in official documentation, keep referring to it, even though they have repealed it. And I find a combination of this, the German BFR, the Dutch Packaging and Utensils Regulation, and Council of Europe Resolution AP 89.1 on purity requirements and colorants is probably the best route. A combination of these things makes up the best route for clearance of colorants. So that is how I would recommend you deal with those substances, which once again aren't often listed in harmonised legislation. One other odd thing with France is it has a ban in place on bisphenol A being used in food contact applications in France, but not on the manufacture of bisphenol A for export or things containing bisphenol A manufactured for export. Now this